Promising Practice webinar on promising approaches to data quality. My name is Myra Thomas, and I'll be the technical moderator for this event. Before we begin, I just wanted to go over a few things. First, all phone lines will be muted during the event to cut down on any background noise. So if you have a question during the presentation, you can submit it to me through the chat feature. Secondly, this event will be recorded and made available for review on the NRS web. Now I'm pleased to introduce Larry Condelli, the Project Director of the NRS Support Project, who will introduce today's event.
Thank you so much, Amara, and hello everybody, and thank you for joining us today on what I hope is going to be a really exciting and interesting webinar. As you all know, who've been involved in these webinars, we like to periodically highlight work being done in states and among other partners on various NRS issues, including data collection and monitoring. And one of the things we've always focused on in the NRS trainings and our support project is on improving data quality, and we always like to hear from states that that are doing a good job on this and that can share some of their expertise on how they do it, and hopefully you'll all get some great insights from them. So I'm going to again welcome you. Thank you again for attending, and I'll turn it over to Marcella, who's been the leader for these webinars, and she will talk about our presenters.
Great. Thank you, Larry. So today we're going to be doing just a quick welcome. We already had Myra welcome all of you, and Larry as well. I'm going to introduce the webinar series, and then we'll move on to our discussion, which is what you're really here for. So to give you just a little bit of background on this webinar series, we've been running these webinars for I think about 3 years now, and it's part of our ongoing effort to help states improve their use of data for programs as well. And each of our webinars looks at a specific strategy. We get a lot of questions time and time again about how to use these specific strategies. In this case, what can we do to improve our data quality? And so we hope that hearing from states who have been successful in implementing this, that have some promising approaches to improving their data quality, you'll get some ideas that you can really put into practice on your own. So before we get started and hear from our panelists, we wanted to hear from you about what you think when you hear the words data quality. And on the right-hand side, you'll see a chat pod. I know that there's also a questions pod, but if you could try to put it in the chat pod and share it with everyone, we want to hear what these words mean from you, and it'll sort of provide a background for us and for the panelists to know who, what everyone's understanding is. So we'll just give you a minute here to do that. Right, so we're getting some great answers so far. We have a few people saying that it's free of errors, reliable, valid, useful data, consistent, clear data entry. It's all about accuracy. Having the correct data easily accessible, accurate resources. Again, importance of accuracy can't be understated. Good, reliable data. Reliable, valid, accurate, timely. That's a very good point, that it needs to be timely. And yes, complete as well. Great. Okay, so now that we've seen that this is what it means to you, that it's high quality, free of errors, that it's accurate, that it's timely, it's reliable, valid, and complete. We're going to hear from from our panelists, and they will be sharing with us what data quality means in their states. We'll be hearing today from 3 states. We'll be hearing from Beverly and Bobby from Georgia, from Elaine in Missouri, and Bob and Rosemary in New York. All right, so let's get started. Now, the question that I'm posing here to the panelists is, what prompted you to start thinking about data quality in your state? Let's see, Georgia, I think you shared with me a few slides on this. So why don't we start with you? Can you tell us what was going on in Georgia that made you really have this as a focus?
Beverly, do you want to start or do you want me to?
Sure, I'll go ahead. This is Beverly. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I think the thing, and good afternoon to everybody. I think the thing that was most important to me when I was new in this job, just 4 or 5 years ago, was when I first negotiated our NRS results with Sharon Langford, who's our representative from Octave, and looked at where we stood in terms of what quartile we were in, and realized that we were not in a good place at that time. I guess that's at the point when I realized that data quality in terms of what it is and what it was most important to us. And really started looking at and realizing that this is a strong tool. So I think it was a matter of really needing to rely on that data, and it first came to my attention of the value of it when I realized I needed us to really focus ourselves on going from where we were to something that really made a lot more sense. And so that's when I said, okay, we got to really make sure that we're paying attention to this. We need to find a way to use it as a tool. We need to find a way to use it as a good bit of management information. I don't think our field folks realized where we stood in terms of our standing, and I think it was, for us, just a real eye-opener in terms of this is something we need to pay strong attention to.
Mm-hmm. Great. And Bobby, was there anything you wanted to add to that?
A lot. Good afternoon, everyone. In terms of quality data, I believe it's based on clearly defined data collection policies and procedures, and having a good system that can collect uniform data across the state. In my 22 years in adult education, and as far back as I can think about in terms of NRS, the state had some type of data quality process to check data, but there's kind of 2 points that stick out in my mind. And the first was as a result of, in 2005, the feds monitored us and we were put on a corrective action plan as a state. And part of that, our work there, was to develop a state MIS, a data collection system. We didn't have one at the time. And we were very fortunate to be part of the Technical College System of Georgia, so our tech ed partners could help us. They actually, in 2005, 2006, early part, designed a system and had it operational. And that system's called GALIS, Georgia Adult Learner Information System. And the system has worked outstanding for us and provides real-time data to both the state and the local programs. When we started looking at the design of it, we knew that we needed a system that would generate, of course, our federal reports, but we wanted it to be so much more than that. We worked with the field to customize the system so that it proved to be an invaluable tool for them. In addition to our NRS reports, we designed end-user reports down to class, teacher, and student. Over time, we've added to those reports as we saw the need or had requests from the field. And currently, we have over 200 reports in the system, and that's what's shown on the screen that you're looking at on the screen. Is just a summary of our reports. In addition to that, we also built into the system required fields around our NRS data collection requirements and designed blocks in the system that local programs had to complete the required fields before they could save student data. Also, we built in prompts to identify if the student was already in the system so that duplications could be avoided. these kind of centered on like name, date of birth, social security number. If you look at the statewide NRS reports and then the local NRS reports, there's much more there, as you see, than what the feds require of us, and that's because we've designed those reports to be able to drill down by individual program, by site, by teacher. So programs can really look at performance down to the teacher level and to the student level. The second point in time that I think about in terms of data quality kind of goes along with the lines of what Assistant Commissioner Smith said in terms of her coming aboard, and she restructured our office to have a team that, we already had a team that supported the field, but it was really a quality assurance team in some way. Prior to her time, we had professional development, which also had the accountability piece in it, and so my team is kind of pulled out and removed from that so that we look at accountability and practices, and I think that's helped to strengthen our process. In 2010, 2011, when I came aboard in this position, we noted something odd, that it was not really that we were having an issue of retaining students to meet our completion targets. It was actually that the programs were just not post-testing students. We had students across the system that had in the hundreds of hours and no post-test. So we developed some post-test tracker reports yes, I think that's the next slide, where the local programs could look at post-testing, where students needed to be post-tested. Our first iteration of this was just it's that one. Our first iteration of this was, anyway, our first iteration was a program-wide report, and we found this to be not useful to the field, particularly for some of our very, very large programs where they have thousands of students. So our second iteration, which we're trying to show on the screen, drills down to individual teacher. So if you look at this slide here, you see that we blocked out the names, but Sandra is the teacher up at the top, and the number of classes so that Sandra can go in and look at her specific students about where they stand in terms of pre-testing and if they need post-testing. And then I think the next slide, hopefully, is the post-test tracker, and that kind of shows you just an image of how that, one of the reports from Sandra on how it would look in our data system. Now, I may note to you this is old data, so the days since test are very, very high, but that's because we pull data from quite some time. But those, I think, are the two things that kind of stick out in my mind.
Great. So let's see. How about Missouri? You had a slightly different take on this, of things that you wanted to share with us. Sorry. Elaine?
Hi, sorry. A lot of the things that I have to say about it are very similar to Bobby and what Beverly said, so I'm not going to go into all of that, everything that they said, but kind of like what Beverly said about data quality and that we weren't satisfied with our performance. We were kind of middle of the road, so especially for EFL, gain, what we call progression in Missouri. I don't know if everybody calls it progression, but so we were progressing about 4 out of 10 students when I started working with adult education. It's like, that's just not, to me, where we should be. So we came up with several reports. Sounds like some of them are similar to what you went through, Bobby. The first one, and so I just want to show some of these to you, and I'm going to just briefly talk about them, just in that way if anybody wants to, find them useful and want to use anything similar, you'll have them. This first report is summarized data for a particular program that we have in Missouri. We have one of these for every one of our programs, and we have it for monthly. The information is monthly. I'm just showing you the last 3 months of last year for this particular program, and it shows us total number of students, total persistence rate at 12 hours, persistence rate at 30+ hours. It shows us the percent of post-tested students, and then kind of right above there where it says financials, it's the percent of students that progressed as compared to the percent of the target, the federal target. So this particular program progressed 67% of their students. Our target in Missouri, our federal target, is 63%. So this program is doing a really good job for progression. If we had a program that wasn't doing very well for progression, you could really look at this program and drill down to just similar things to what Bobby said. It's like, are the students not progressing? Are the students not persisting? And in this program, they're persisting pretty good. Are they post-testing their students? This program post-tested 70% of their students. That's pretty good. And then, if all those things are happening and you had a program that wasn't doing a very good job of progression, well, if all those other things are looking good, we have right above financial that's progressed of those post-tested. So if in this program, everybody that we post-tested is doing a great job, 96% of them progressed. But if you had a really low percent there, it's like, well, okay, then it's probably an instructional thing, whereas some of these other things, it's about, are they staying, are they persisting, are they post-testing? The other thing that we look at is the financials. If a program's doing a really good job progressing their students, but they're spending a lot of money to do it, we still have a concern with that program. This particular program, the cost per student is $621.22. Our average cost per student in Missouri is about $650. So this program's doing a good job. If we had a program that was progressing 67% of their students, but they were spending $1,500 a student to do that, we'd still be really concerned about that program. So we kind of look at it from both angles, just not the performance in and of itself, but how much money is it taking a program to do that. Okay, so the next slide is the report I want to show you, and I don't want to bore you well with these reports. I just thought it might be helpful to show it to you. That's okay. Okay, so we've got progress by class code. So again, similar to what Bobby said, you can look at a particular class. Every class is typically assigned to a particular teacher. A class code is assigned to a particular teacher, so you can look at this and know whether or not your teacher is doing a good job. This particular teacher, one thing I want to mention, when we look at progression, we look at progression overall by the program. We look at the total number of students that progress as compared to the total number of students eligible to progress, those that have been pre-tested and have 12+ hours. So we don't look at it, while we have the information by level, we don't really hold a program accountable to progression by level. We look at it overall. So this particular program progressed 59 students out of 94 at a 63% progression rate. So if you go to the next slide. So this particular class, meaning this particular instructor, progressed only 58 students out of 152 eligible students to progress. So 38%. So that's not very good. So we'd want to dig into, okay, why is this instructor not doing a very good job? What's going on? And then we can look at it by level. Is she having a problem with a particular level? No, every single level is pretty bad. So let's dig into this a little bit more. So if you go to the next slide. So, and let me explain, this is not, I just pick random reports. These are all actual reports, but these are random, so they don't all tie together. So then we can drill down to progress by student. So let's look at this particular teacher. and look at her students and see what's going on. And I did leave the names in mind, but so Luis Hernandez, for example, was pre-tested in TABE, and we have these initials TABE. So the TR1 is he was TABed, and his lowest level is 1, and the subject is reading. Did he get a post-test? Yes. The 12+ progression column, the P's are the students that progressed, the N is they did not progress, and A is they advanced more than 1 level. So this just gives us just more information just to really drill down into the program to say, okay, so we've got that summary data, and are we doing a good job? The particular program I showed you, yes, they were doing a good job. But if it was a program that wasn't doing a good job, let's drill down more. Let's see what's going on. Where's the problem? Is it program-wide? Is it because of a particular instructor, and one instructor is not doing a good job and another instructor is doing a good job, and if the one that isn't doing a good job, you need to figure out what's going on with that instructor. Well, why is she not progressing her students? So these are all just some data reports that will help you drill down in that. And then I've got one more I want to show you. And this is very similar to what Bobby talked about. Like, so for this particular class code, again, this is just a sample. We've got students, and we do not require programs to post-test at 40 hours. This is just another report to look at to help guide programs, guide teachers as to what's going on. So we've got a student here that has 102 hours in class and hasn't been post-tested. You know, what's going on with that student? Something's going on. Is it a student that just isn't capable, or, something's going on, and so on. So this is just more information to help the program, us at the state level, figure out what's going on with the program, where's the problems, where's the concerns. So I will say that coming up with all of these reports was helpful in knowing what's going on, but it didn't, this in and of itself did not help us improve our performance overall. And I'll get into that with the next question. So as to what we did from this point forward, because these were all helpful, but it still didn't get us where we needed to be with getting our programs to value this data and use it. So, okay.
Ellen, we had a question for you, if you don't mind clarifying. On this slide, what does 12+ prog mean?
Oh, progression. Again, in Missouri, we call EFL gain progression. So these are students that have at least 12 hours or more, and did they or did they not progress?
Gotcha. And then on, I think it must, sorry, on a previous slide, there was the 30+ persistence rate.
Right. We wanted to look at persistence. We look at it at 12 hours. That's the above the total 30+ students. The persistence rate above that is for 12 hours. Then we look at persistence rate at 30 hours. Are our students staying? Are they staying 12 hours? And then are they staying 30 hours? That just gives us more information.
Okay.
That's what that is. Are they staying 30 hours? What's the percent? How many students have stayed 30 hours? And what percent of students stay 30 hours?
And when you say progression, yes, when you say progression, do you mean EFL gain or progressing within the level?
It's EFL gain. When we say progression in Missouri, when I say progression, I mean EFL level gain.
And one last clarifying question was, what is ESL 7?
ESL 7 and ASU 6. That's what we artificially created that level in Missouri.
Okay.
It doesn't get reported, but we so that a level 6 person, somebody that pre-tests, an ESL student pre-tests in level 6, they have some place to progress to.
Okay. That's very helpful. And let's see. So we're going to jump over to New York and hear what they had to say. But before we do, maybe New York, you could answer one of the questions that came up. was about whether there's always a direct correlation, in your expert opinion, between post-testing and gain. Have you seen a direct correlation between how often you post-test your students and them showing gains?
Marcella, I'm sorry, who were you asking that question to?
That was for Bob and Rosemary.
Okay.
We're going to start with them for that one.
So yes, this is Rosemary, and we would say most definitely yes, that we found a direct correlation between the post-test rate and the educational gain, so much so that when we first began looking at data quality with the help of AIR and the support of AIR, we were looking specifically at educational gain, at least at the onset, and we wanted to raise educational gain. And it was one of those experiences, you know, a funny thing happened on the way to finding ed gain. We realized that what we really needed to focus on in New York State was our post-test rate. And so we moved our attention to the post-test rate and realized that so many of our programs were not post-testing timely enough, and they were losing students before they had the opportunity to post-test the students. So while there may have been gain, it wasn't being captured through the data. So we worked on that specifically and ended up, after much ado, setting a post-test benchmark for our state at 70%. So our programs had to post-test their students at a 70% rate in order to make the benchmark, and those benchmarks become flags for us in terms of corrective action. If a program doesn't meet any one of the 3 state benchmarks that we feature on our report card, one of which is post-testing at 70%. If they fall below the 70%, they are automatically put under corrective action, and we provide them with technical support to help them understand not just the importance of post-testing, but how it impacts their educational gain and their persistence with their students. So all of that came from that tie between ed gain and post-test rate. Does that answer, Marcella, what you were looking for?
Yes, I think so. Yeah. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about or provide a little bit more background about, in response to the same question, about what was going on in New York that led you to really focus on this issue of data quality.
Right, and I think if you can go to the next slide there, and unfortunately Mr. Perga in the interim, because it got late already, he had to leave, so he's gone, and I'm gonna take his slides as well. So
okay.
these were originally going to be shared by him, but some of the challenges that we really faced is what provoked the amount of attention we gave to data quality. We oversee 172 funded programs, but it's the diversity in those programs that really provoked most of the attention that we gave to data quality. Our largest program serves 27,000 students, and that's our New York City Department of Education. And then we have a small program that serves 21 students, and the remaining 170 are somewhere between that 21 student population and 27,000. So at State Ed, we have our director, that's Bob Perga, and then he has 6 regional staff that are assigned to geographic regions within the state that support a cohort of each of those 172 funded programs. And then they bid, because of the size and the variations in those programs, they did bid a competitive bid out for an NRS accountability specialist, and that was me. So I have my full-time commitment is to data quality, and I have an assistant and associate that works with me, and our job is essentially to support all 172 funded programs and make sure that the quality of the data speaks to the actual provision of service that they have committed to, so that when we look at what they're doing, is it consistent with what they expected to do? Is it consistent with what they're funded to do? And is the quality of the data actually representing what's happening in those programs? To that end, and if you can move to the next slide, Marcella, please. Thank you. So to that end, what we really wanted to make certain of throughout any amount of data quality checking that we're doing is that there is complete transparency. And I think the other two states have already mentioned that you've developed monitoring tools, as have we, and we always wanted to make sure that our programs were seeing exactly what we were seeing, that we're not going to pull some fancy tool or some fancy report that we then present to them, that everything that we look at, everything that we're capable of producing out of the data system is exactly what they can produce on a daily basis, so that they can keep a pulse and monitor their own data quality while we are doing that at the same time, such that when I visit programs, for example, on a site visit, nothing I should be telling them should be new to them. All of the information that I'm providing to them should be something that they've already encountered based on the information that they can glean from the data through these reports. Every report that we have is accessible to every program throughout the Electronic Management Information System, which for us is ASIS. And some of you probably are very familiar with VANU, who I work very closely with. And our system is the Adult Student Information System and technical assistance that we provide through that data system. So we have ad hoc reports that we can work with, and many of them are very similar to what you just had up on the screen. So I can relate to all of those with regard to looking at the students that were post-tested, how often they're post-tested. We have what we call data check reports, so they're not necessarily error reports. It's an opportunity for the program to keep tabs on whether or not their students are moving through the system in the way that it was intended to. And sometimes, because of the variations in our systems, there are situations where student populations don't fit perfectly into the system that we've designed, and so those data check reports just alert the program that we're aware that they do have cohorts of students that don't fit well into the system, and that we know that they're still trying to work with those students. If you can go to the next slide. So some of you are probably very familiar with our report card because it's been around now for almost a decade. This is a report card that we put together and constructed under the guidance of AIR. They really were very helpful to us in identifying our priorities. And I did send you, Marcella, the actual PDF of this, but all of our report cards are available on our website, the State Education Department website, so it's a public document. This one in particular is the one for our largest program that does serve 27,000 students. And you can see on the far left there that under benchmarks, we immediately identify whether or not the program has met all three of the benchmarks. And the benchmarks are the EdGain, the post-test rate, and then the follow-up outcomes. All three of which are very important to us, and if they miss one of those benchmarks, they are automatically placed under corrective action. And then we go on to look at other characteristics of their data. We also have a weighting system, and I don't know, Marcella, if I should go into that because that really doesn't relate to data quality. Right. That's right. I mean, I think I'm going to skip over that because that's not really what we're looking at. So if
anyone has a question, maybe they can email you about it.
Sure. Sure. It's the educational gain that we weight. We put heavier weights in some gain areas over others, so that we didn't have an inclination for programs to try to serve those students that were most predicting that they would most often show gain. We wanted to make sure that those populations that were going to be the hardest to serve did indeed continue to be served. So we weighted our gain so that it sort of evened it all out for us, and that has worked extremely well for us. Okay, so if you can go to the next page. Once you take a look at the report card, you'll see that everything on this program evaluation report is on that report card, so that this is the report that's available to programs every single day. Our data is refreshed through the night on a periodic basis. It's done automatically, so that the next morning, every day, they can look at their program evaluation report and have a really good idea of what their report card would look like that day. These program evaluation reports, everything that's of importance to us and to them in terms of aggregate data, is all on this report. It's on a one-page report, and it's a great opportunity for program managers to really take a look at their entire program. But the report is also able to be disaggregated. We can pull it apart by teacher, by site, by class, by program format. So if we want to look specifically at ESL versus adult basic ed, we can look at individual levels. We also, and I didn't take a screenshot of it, but we have the ability with this program evaluation report, similar to, I think it was Bobby that mentioned it, that you can look at individual teachers. So we actually have an Excel document that comes out of our data system where it can take every single teacher in that program and give you these statistics that relate on this program eval report for each of those teachers, and it's done in a spreadsheet, so we can sort it by teacher, we could sort it by site, or by any other characteristic that we were looking to focus on. For us, that's really important. It's hard, for example, when you have the New York City Department of Ed, there are over 500 teachers, and so it's really hard to try to run one of these reports on each one. So it's much easier for me, for example, to just run the aggregate report, and it'll give me every one of those 500 teachers and every bit of data associated with each one of those teachers, so that I can, with one document, really have a pretty good idea of what's happening in New York City. The other thing that this allows us to do is every teacher in every program in the state has read-only access to this data system. So they are so aware of their data quality such that they are being asked, and part of their responsibility is to check their own data quality for each class that they operate with and every student that they have, so that they can tell whether the quality of the data that's in the system is actually identified with what's happening in the classroom. And we do put that responsibility onto them.
And Rosemary, how does the data load to generate this report?
How does it load?
Yeah, how?
I don't know what you mean. It comes
okay.
It comes out. Yeah, it comes out in actually two different ways. It comes out as either a PDF document, which is the one that you're looking at, or that same document can be moved to an Excel document.
Okay.
So that if need be, it could be done, and they're both electronic, so they can be emailed, between program staff and so on.
And the data just comes out automatically from your system?
Management information system, that's correct. It comes right out of the management information system. And we also are able to disaggregate it by funding source, which for us is very important because we have state funding sources and then we have our federal funding sources. So we often need to separate the two, particularly when we're looking at the number of students being served. And these reports are all able to be disaggregated in that way.
Great.
So I don't know if I should go further now with our ITAP and corrective action. I feel like I've been talking too long.
Yeah, we have a few questions about that, but I think maybe that is related to our next question. But we did have one more question for you about how you encourage teachers to check their data. Or I guess what kind of encouragement you provide.
Yeah, I think we predominantly leave that up to the program manager, that they need to check their data, but we hold teachers responsible. So for example, one of the jobs that I have with my assistant is that she will randomly check teachers' reports at various programs, and if she sees a report that doesn't look like it's on target, she actually graphs and charts their progress, and then we contact that teacher and ask that teacher to give us information about their own data. And so teachers throughout the state are, word got around rather quickly that when they get a call from my office, it's not usually for a good reason. So they're a little nervous about that, and they know one of the things that we built into our system, which has been enormously helpful to me, is that we can tell when the teacher has been in the system based on their username and password. So oftentimes we've had some teachers that'll say, oh yes, I check my data every day. Well, we know that you don't do that because your username hasn't been used for 4 months. So we can tell when they've been in the system and what they've done and what reports they've run. So my assistant checks on that often. When we have a teacher that looks like there's been no activity, she will then tweak that teacher and let them know via email that we haven't seen any activity from them and we need them to go in and take a look at their reports. So teachers, that it didn't take long for the field to rumor around that we were watching for this. And so teachers are very careful now to make sure that they go in under their own username and password and they look at their data, because we can tell by the back end tables whether or not that's actually happened.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and it sounds like that kind of leads into part of maybe the other states' process as well for ensuring that you have high quality data. Elaine, in Missouri, do you similarly encourage teachers to check their own data? Elaine?
Maybe she's muted?
Yeah, Elaine, you might be muted. In which case maybe we'll...
I'm sorry. Yes, we have our teachers and our local directors definitely check their data. I don't know if you're wanting me to talk about this next one yet. I mean, what really...
that would be great.
Okay, what really pushed... I'm sorry?
Oh, yeah, this was a great way to transition into what your
So what really pushed our programs, local programs, teachers, directors, local directors into paying attention to their data was, I mean, I talked about all the reports, and it sounds like New York and Georgia have similar reports. They may look a little different, but we all look at the data similarly, and we can drill down to teachers and students and all of that stuff to see what's going on with the program. But what really made our program start paying attention to the data is when we started tying money to performance. And that's what made the data valuable to our local programs. So if you would show that one slide, Marcella. Yeah, so this is what really made a huge difference in Missouri. Last year, our educational gain was 65% for our state. We were very proud of that. And this was the key to everything, is when we started tying money to our performance, meaning our programs then started paying attention to their data. So one of the things that we did several years ago is we changed the way we started funding our programs. We used to fund our programs based on contact hours, and there were some other things in the mix with that funding formula, but the biggest chunk of the funding was based on contact hours. And that drove a behavior that we didn't want in Missouri, and so we started really thinking about that, because it was more about contact hours, was more about making sure people were sitting in seats and staying in the program, as opposed to getting them in, getting them good instruction, and then getting them out. So we started focusing on quality of programs instead of quantity of programs. So in Missouri, I'm sure like most states, we have a 3-year grant cycle. Of course, this year, because of we're in our 4th year of our 3-year grant cycle. But anyway, typically we have a 3-year grant cycle. The first year of the grant cycle, the budget is based on the grant request that they submit to us through the competitive process. Of course, that's negotiated. We don't necessarily give them exactly what they ask for, but that first year is based on the budget request and what we negotiate with them. Then the second and third year, it's based, 90% of the budget is based on what they get the first year, so we basically have a 90% hold harmless to make sure that programs always have enough money to do what they need to do to operate. And then 10%, and it may seem like a small percent, but 10% of our budget with our local programs is based on performance. And while it may seem small, believe me, it has worked in Missouri. Our programs fight tooth and nail to get that 10%. That 10% then is made up of 7% is overall program progression. Again, progression, we just call it progression in Missouri. It's educational gain. And that 7% is a sliding scale. You get 7% of the 10% if you meet or exceed the federal target, which again in Missouri is 63% for educational gain. And and then all the way down, the sliding scale down to 1% if you're within 15% of the federal target. And then 3% of the 10% is for HSE attainment. And again, that's a sliding scale. We're probably going to change this a little bit now because of WIOA, but this is what we've done in the past. So the emphasis has changed a little bit with things with WIOA, so we'll probably change it. So that's one of the things that we've done that was huge in Missouri as far as making changes and programs paying attention to their data. It was unbelievable what just that 10% and simplifying the budget. So the other thing that we started doing just 2 years ago is we started providing incentive money for exceeding selected criteria. And that criteria changes depending on what we want to emphasize with our programs. We always, progression or educational gain is always one of the things that we give incentive money for if you meet or exceed the federal target. We also look at, and we always include this in the incentive money formula, is how many students did you serve in relation to the dollar spent. So basically kind of, again, that cost per. It has to be efficient. You can't just be progressing and spending a lot of money. It has to be, you have to be doing it efficiently. So the other thing with our incentive money is we tell the programs they can spend that money on anything they want to spend it on as long as it's allowable. It doesn't have to be based on what you put in your grant or anything. You can use that money for anything that you want as long as, of course, that it's allowable. So, and then there's one more slide that I want to show you. So the other thing that we added a couple years ago was to make our programs really paying attention to their data is we started giving out a high quality award. And that takes into account pretty much everything, the educational gain, entered employment, post-secondary, HSE attainment, and cost per student. So these three things that I just talked to you about is what really started making our programs paying attention to their data, wanting to perform, and actually they've done a really good job. Like I said, last year our educational gain in Missouri was 65%, so we were very proud of that. So this is what got us there. These three things are what got us there. So.
Great. And it sounds like it's been very successful as far as getting the teachers to pay attention to their data and
yes, very much. Very much. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, no, of course. Rosemary, do you want to talk to us a little bit about the process in New York and what you've done to ensure that you have data quality in New York?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so if you could go to the ITAP and corrective action page.
Sure. Sorry, let me.
I have to say, though, I love the ideas that I've already heard here today. They're great.
And
Go ahead.
Sorry. No, I was going to say, I hope that others that are on the line as well have heard some great ideas that they think that they can implement, and perhaps you'll see yourself reflected in what our panelists are saying and see that you might have a very promising approach that you're using in your program already. All right, that's all. Go ahead.
Okay, so we created what's called the Individual Technical Assistance Program. Once they had my position in place and I knew that I had an assistant, it gave us the opportunity to really work individually with programs that truly needed assistance. It wasn't necessarily that they were resisting compliance or resisting good data quality, but they didn't really know how to get there, and they didn't know how to get the right help to get there. So we implemented this Individual Technical Assistance Program. It was really to give, oh gosh, my computer just went out on me. I don't know why. That's interesting. Okay. Well, I have the slides on paper, so I can go that route. So the ITAP gave us an opportunity to identify programs every year. We actually identify between 21 and 30 programs a year across the state of those that are going to receive extra help, essentially. And what that help does is it looks at various situations that have developed in programs. So, for example, a program might be selected just because they've demonstrated poor performance, but they don't know how to improve, or they don't know what direction they need to go in. If there's a change in leadership, so if we have a brand new program manager, or if there's a significant staff turnover in any one of the programs, they might be identified to become part of the ITAP. And then our big 5 school districts. We have 5 school districts that are the most urban, and of course New York City Department of Ed is the first, and then you'll recognize some of them. Buffalo, Syracuse, Rochester, and our Yonkers school district comprise the big 5, essentially because they are so large and they serve so many students that if they should fall under our benchmarks, they could skew the entire state's data. They could have that kind of impact, so they remain ITAPs regardless of whether they're performing well or not, simply because within a year's time they could slide in one direction or another, and we wanted to make certain that we had something in place that could assist them on a regular basis. So what that means when they're under ITAP is essentially they get a lot of attention from my office. They also get the attention of the State Education Department regional staff that I mentioned earlier. There's 1 regional staff assigned to each of our 7 geographic regions. And then we have what we call a RAIN director, and that's a regional adult education network director that provides professional development in those 7 geographic regions. And so what happens is they work in concert with us and with me so that when we're there for site visits, we're sort of very well-rounded in that we have the state ed individual, the staff member there, who can talk to them about policies and procedures and funding. Then we have the RAIN director, who identifies professional development opportunities that are necessary to support that ITAP organization. And then we have myself and my assistant who come in and help them work on their data quality, their data timeliness, whether or not they're actually inputting the data in a way that makes sense for the program and for our schedules as well. We also provide them quarterly webinars, and those webinars are recorded so that if all of their staff are not able to attend, they can, and those are customized for each individual program, and we record all of them so that they can then watch the webinar whenever they need to or whenever they can do that. We also have a website, and it is the ITAP and Corrective Action. It's the accountability website. And again, I'm not seeing the computer, so if you can go to the next slide that I had a picture of the website.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is, I already went through, yeah, there it is. Okay. Yeah, so this is the website that we use, and you need a username and a password. So the programs that are ITAP agencies, you'll see on the far left, they have to go in through that green button. The corrective action agencies go in through the brownish colored button, and when they go in, they are assigned a username and password, and so they identify which staff are going to go in. And if you go to the next slide, you can see what they see when they get in there, and this gives us the opportunity to track online all of the support that we're giving them. I'm sure everybody on this line at one point or another, on this webinar rather, when you have a program that really has not come up to speed and you start talking about possibly taking away funding, the first thing that happens, at least here anyway in New York, is the program pushes back and says, well, nobody helped me, nobody gave me the support I needed, we didn't get guidance, we didn't get direction. Well, to compensate for that, we make sure that everything we do to support programs is documented on this website. So there's a tracking log that talks about any time the site was visited, any time we made phone calls, any time we gave webinars. We do a summary and we post it here electronically so that regardless of where we are at any point in time, if somebody asks me for information about a particular program, I can go onto my site and look at when was the last time we contacted them, how much information did we get from them, who their teaching staff are. All of that is saved on this site. It's been a wonderful opportunity for us because, as you know, it's a pretty hard job for us statewide to get from one end of the state to the other. And this way it helps us. Bob and I are actually 200 miles apart from each other most of the time. So rather than me trying to find a way to get him this information, he can go on this site at any time and he'll know what we've done with that program. So if anybody from that program asks, well, gee, nobody's given us any help, he's able to go in and see when we gave them help, what it was it a phone call, a site visit, how much time was spent, and what was the result of that site visit, what was the summary that was given. And so all of that is posted to the website, and that's been enormously helpful for us not to have to worry about paper, trails, and making sure that we really support programs. So while we support them, we document it every step of the way, and that's been an enormous help to us. The same thing we do for our corrective action programs, so that, again, we can document the kind of support they've received and what the nature of that support was.
Okay, wonderful.
I think that was it for us, if I remember right. Yeah.
So, in Georgia, do you have a similar system with providing technical assistance to programs that need a little bit more support?
Yes, we do. We do programs that miss most of their educational gain targets, or what we deem as low performing, whether it be that they're very low in several areas, or more than 50% of them that they were significantly off target. We do place programs on what we call performance improvement plans, where we require them to assemble as a team and work through the year to identify first what do they believe their issues were prior, and then how those issues can be addressed. So we have that process. We also have a process in place we call it a corrective action plan, and that's when we identify when a program is not understanding policy. They're violating some kind of policy, whether it may be assessment or program intake, whatever the case may be. We put programs on a corrective action plan for violating policy. In terms of this question, I guess I can just say really quickly, I took it from a little different angle in terms of we knew that quality data was dependent on guidance from the state level. So that was the first thing we knew, that is, if we wanted consistent data across the state, high quality data across the state, we had to inform that. We had to let the local programs know. And we knew that at different points within the process, there were different people who touched that data, whether it's the intake person initially or the teacher, then going to the data entry person, going on to the person who does the assessment, whether it be pre-test or post-test, and we needed to have training that would address the needs of all these different groups. So a few things that I've listed here that we have in place is we have a GALIS user, our data system user guide, that's available so that people understand really what they're collecting and how to enter it into the system. We also have some online training modules that individuals can use. We do data training for new users. We encourage local programs to have data managers, and we do training separate for those data managers. Of course, we, like other states, have a standard intake form with directions and definitions, and we note on there the required fields. We require annual NRS training each fiscal year. We also have what we call an NRS 101 that's required of all new personnel. We do request, we don't require, but we do request that each person in the program, each teacher in particular in the program, have at least read-only access into the system. One of the things that was mentioned, we do also recognize programs through awards at our fall conference for meeting those programs that meet all of their educational gain targets. We also look at program growth in terms of enrollment or performance growth over prior years. We do have a system in place for that. Up on the screen, I think one of the things that it's not in our data system, it's actually an electronic form that's attached to the data system that programs can pull off, and they actually, I think, can enter into it online, but is what we call an OAE educational gain calculation tool, and it's similar to what some of the others have talked about, where you're looking at the total number enrolled, total number that completed the level to let you know where you're at the point. The system generates that already for teachers. The part that's different from what our system generates starts with the pinkish colored box that says negotiated FY16 percentage on over, so that they actually know the total number of completions they need to meet that target and how many additional completions are needed to meet that goal. That's been a very, very effective tool. We require it as a part of the PIP if programs aren't using it, and most programs do already. We require that they use this form and tell us how they're going to use it, whether it be that each individual teacher is responsible for generating it on a certain number, once a month, twice a month, or if somebody else does it within their program and then shares it with the teachers. Also, one of the things that was also talked about is the regional coordinators. I know New York talked about it. We do have 4 regional coordinators, grant program support coordinators that I work with, who work in different regions of the state and are critical to our quality data system. They monitor local programs' data through desktop monitoring and provide technical assistance, data analysis, and training related to data in NRS for their assigned programs. Also, we have on staff what we call an IS, Instructional Services Technical Coordinator, and that person takes the lead on developing our data quality and other required report trainings, or required in reporting trainings. And then we also have somebody that, I guess the word would be womans our system in terms of a data systems analyst, and she really covers our help desk and is able to answer any concerns or inquiries from the field, or then, if necessary, channel that to the appropriate person to help that local program. She also takes the lead in scoping out our new reports and working with our technical education side to develop and implement new reports. And I think there was one more slide that I had, or perhaps not. No.
Sorry.
I didn't submit it. It's okay. No worries.
Okay. Okay. Sorry. Okay, so I'm trying to be mindful of the time. I see some people getting off now 4 o'clock, but we still have another half hour. But I do want to make sure we talk about everything that we hope to cover. So I know people are probably going, the participants are going to be very interested in hearing about your results. We've heard about your really interesting processes that you've been using. But of course, it's the data that shows how well these things are working. So Rosemary, can you just talk to us really briefly about the results that you've seen since you've come on board and started this really in-depth TA process in New York?
I think that the most important results from our perspective is the feedback we're getting from our programs, that we've had programs over and over again every year that are ITAP'd, and so they're the ones that receive that technical assistance, which you would think they'd want to be cut loose from that. But we have programs that beg to stay on as an ITAP because they understand now that everything they're doing in terms of data has meaning in their program. And we help them understand how to use that data to inform every part of their program in terms of instruction, in terms of persistence, in terms of orientation and intake, and how the data should really help them, even ordering supplies. You know, we had a program that ordered thousands of dollars of supplies for upper level students, and when we showed them their data, you would think it would have been very obvious to them, but it wasn't. That, you know, the focus of their support for their students should have been in the lower levels because that's the predominance of students that they had on their data. But it never occurred to them to look at that data perspective. They were just looking at what they thought the teachers needed or wanted. So from our perspective, I think it's hearing that the programs are so much more hungry now for this kind of information, where it may have been very distasteful initially and they felt as though they were being punished when they were put under ITAP. Now they're at a point where we have programs calling Mr. Perga and asking if they could please become an ITAP because they think that their teachers could really benefit from understanding how to use that data in their own classrooms. So for us, that's been a really rewarding part of all of this.
How about in Georgia? You shared with Rosemary. You mentioned that you had a report, that you had your report card, and you shared that with us. Bobby shared with me his the report card that they've been using in Georgia as well. Do you want to talk about that and your results?
Yeah, this is a statewide report card. The first screenshot that you're looking at is a statewide report card. It's a foldable 4-page document, but it really can be generated at any point in the year. In our thought process in designing it, we wanted it to be something that they could print out from the local program, either our state data or their local program data, and share that with their partners, so that it was a nice visual representation of what had occurred in the program or what was occurring in the program. And you see the different elements there in terms of our age breakdown, our gender, employment status, race, ethnicity, and I think on the second slide, maybe hopefully on the next slide, there's the information related to our actual performance. So again, some more demographic information in terms of enrollment, our teachers, our funding, students who completed one or more educational function levels. There's checked by the areas that we've met the target, and then we also give student achievement outcome in terms of entered employment, retained employment based off of the WIA measures. They have until August the 15th to make sure that all data is entered in the system, so we have a few more days to get that. And then I think next one is just a local program report that shows you that they can do it at the local level too. It's basically, I won't go through it, it's basically the same thing in terms of data, but just for that particular program. And the next page is the same. Okay.
All right, how about in Missouri?
Coming out, or the state's, reviewing us, or they actually, while there is still a little bit of that, they appreciate the fact that we come out, because we look at the data with them. We sit down with them and talk about it and what it all means and how to take those reports and use them to make their program better. So they see it as a very valuable thing. We also have our PD provider has a workshop called Data Management, and that is our most attended workshop. That our PD provider really dives into the data and helps the teachers make sense out of all of the reports and how all of the reports affect the performance and all the different performance factors that we have. So the teachers are very interested in going to that workshop so that they can really make sense out of all of the data and how it all ties to performance, because again, all of that means more money for their program. So, and unfortunately, it's all about the money. So, I mean, we want to definitely serve our students and help them, but bottom line, programs are most interested in getting their money every year.
Yeah. All right. Well, you're starting to speak to, I think, the next question that we have on here, which is the challenges. So maybe since you were just speaking, Elaine, you can continue to talk to us a little bit about what you see as the greatest challenge.
What we see as being the greatest challenge probably is the balancing thing, as I talked a while ago about, because it's, we tie money to so many things, and it's not just the performance, and we look at the cost per student, we look at how many students they're serving, in addition to, and making sure that they serve the number of students that they say they're going to serve in their grant. So we throw a lot of these things at our program to make sure you're doing this, make sure you're doing this, make sure you're doing this. And so the biggest challenge to me and to our programs, I think, is balancing all of the things that we throw at them. And like I said, that when I talked about the incentive money earlier, we tweak that and change that a little bit every year because we want our programs to focus, okay, you've got this down, so now let's focus on this. And so we're going to give you incentive money if you start doing this well. So we keep throwing things at them, so it's balancing all of those things. And so to me, that's the biggest challenge that our programs anyway have.
What about Georgia? What has been your greatest challenge in ensuring data quality?
There's one thing that I had kind of on my mind, and then I've thought about it and thought of another thing as well. The first thing I would say is turnover of personnel. Whether it's our teachers, our data entry personnel, or program administrators, the amount of time and volume of training and the different forums and methods that we can provide, that takes up a considerable amount of time. Kind of just to give you, we have 31 programs in Georgia, and to kind of give you a picture of what I'm talking about in turnovers. In 2011, when I came aboard, of course, 31 programs. Since that time, 25 of those program administrators have left positions, and some of those positions have turned over 3 and 4 times. So that leadership at the local program is critical to, I think, to our success and presents a challenge. Another challenge that I think is with the teachers. We operate mostly, we're very fortunate to have a good number of full-time teachers, around 250, but our part-time teachers make up about 1,200. And so getting the message out to them, making sure that they understand, by the time you get that, sometimes it's almost like then there's turnover, but there's good training, I think, at the local level, and then what we provide here at the state level to try to help work on that. Then the other thing that I thought of that's kind of unique that's come to my attention more recently is where I talked earlier in the process about we had programs that weren't post-testing up with students up in the hundreds of hours. Well, ironically now, we have people that have gone to the other extreme, so that they are, when that student hits 40 hours or is close to 40 hours eligible for post-test, then they want to stop instruction right then and test that student. So that's something kind of that has, I guess, our best intentions to try to help them look at their post-testing has kind of backfired a little bit on us, and so we're working through a process now to say, you know, that's the minimum, and that's something we've always said, but I think they hear what they want to hear sometimes versus what we're trying to message.
Right, right. And how about New York? What has been your greatest challenge?
I could have actually echoed what he just said, because it's exactly what we deal with. It's the staff turnover, which is really hard for us. We support roughly 3,500 teachers, both part-time and full-time, and it is hard in terms of getting them the training that they need. And so oftentimes when they're not able to access training quickly enough, because they're brought on with so very little information, they begin like learning from one another or learning from neighboring programs, and somehow the messages get convoluted, and what they hear and what they are told to do is entirely different than what they should be doing. So they get running down a road that we need to bring them back from, and that's really a challenge for us, is finding when that happens and how it happens. And staff turnover is very high for us so often because some of the folks are operating on very, very low budgets, and so their pay scale is very low, and teachers will take the job until they can find something better. And you know, you certainly can't fault them for that, but in the meantime that means that everything we've invested in those current teachers now gets lost, and there very often is not any overlap where one teacher is training another, or even one program manager training another. So that's been a real challenge for us. We also have oftentimes in some of the bigger school districts and the BOCES, which are the community ed programs that program managers sometimes are those individual staff members, I got to be careful how I say this, who may have been excised from other programs and end up becoming the program managers in our programs. So while they didn't perform well in their previous jobs, they now become our program managers, and that's been a real challenge for us, is getting those folks that really had no intention of being in adult ed in the first place, but in order to keep their jobs, they're there. And so they don't really have the background, they don't have the knowledge, and trying to help them to get up to speed while they are immediately put in place is really a challenge for us. I don't know if anyone else has that issue, but we deal with that a lot.
One question somebody asked was whether or not you had difficulty getting your programs on board with the data process as a whole, or did maybe was everybody very understanding and accepting of using data, and did everybody value it?
Are you still talking to me?
Anybody? Yes, to have you on the line, Rosemary, if you want to respond to that.
Yeah, I think it was definitely a challenge at the onset. I think that most of our programs, if I can go back over a decade ago, yeah, there was not real enthusiasm on their part to even think about using data, but they didn't really know what they didn't know. So it was a challenge for us to get them to that point, but we're actually at a point now where if for some reason our data system goes down or a report is not working properly, it's amazing to me how some of these folks are so addicted to data now that they'll call me up and say, I can't see my program evaluation report, I need to see it today. And they're actually excited about it, and they'll call me now with some pretty high-level questions about, you know, an anomaly they're seeing in their data and why is that happening and what can they do to make it not happen. And so I think the level of conversation and the commitment to data quality has definitely increased over time, but initially there was not very much enthusiasm at all, and for some there probably will never be. Some programs still resist to today, you know, knowing that they can't do some of the things that they had been doing in years past. They're a lot more transparent now than they ever were.
Okay, well, we got a question for Elaine about your tying money to the performance. So we're gonna, I'm gonna ask you to be the first one to speak to our next question as well. Elaine, does the monitoring become a bigger importance, or I guess more important, once you began tying money to the performance?
Did the monitoring become more important once we started tying the money to it?
Yeah.
I don't know that the monitoring became more important because when we go out and do the monitoring, I mean, looking at financials and how they're spending their money is something that we've always done, but I'm not sure that that's the question. I'm not sure. I'd like to know what this person's trying to get at. The monitoring, I don't think, became more important. I mean, we continued our monitoring. The monitoring is important, and the programs are very interested in making sure that they meet all the requirements as we do our monitoring. But that is kind of a separate thing, and we don't. I will say this, that when we go through the grant process and we review the grants, you know, we take into account any kind of findings and issues that we had with the program that when we monitor that program. So that comes into play when we're evaluating our grants. But I can't say that tying performance to money made a lot of difference in the monitoring.
Okay, no problem. How about, sure. So before you wrap up, and I want to leave a few minutes for questions, I was hoping that since, you know, for example, Rosemary said that New York has been in this game really for 10 years, and all of you are in states that have quite a bit of experience. And so I think I wanted to try to end here with some tips for other states. So if we have states that are, really trying to, maybe because of WIOA or because of other reasons, focus even more on data quality than they have before, what suggestions do you have, Elaine, for what they can do as first steps to make sure that that happens?
One thing that we always think about, and the question that we ask ourselves here in Missouri is, what behavior do we want our programs to pay attention to? What behavior do we want to change? And what can we do to make them behave in the way we want them to behave? And we start thinking about that and saying, okay, so we start at it from that angle. And again, and I think I'm killing this one, but the tips that I would say is, tie it to, take the behavior, take what it is you're wanting them to do, and somehow tie it to money. And it drives that behavior. It drives them in a direction that you want them to go, or at least here in Missouri it has. I can't say that it will work for everybody, but it does. That's what works here. We think about the behavior that we want that we want to see, the performance, the outcomes, everything that we want our programs to do, and we try to tie it in some way to money, because they listen then. That's when they really start listening, or that's when they started listening to us. I'll put it that way.
Okay. Bobby, how about in Georgia? Do you have any tips for how?
It kind of goes back to what I've talked about before already in terms of having clearly defined policies and procedures and practices in place. I think training is vital, making sure that you have different delivery mechanisms for that training, because you have populations that are very different in terms of full-time teacher, part-time teacher only in the evening. So we try to make sure that we have a blended approach of either face-to-face, webinar, type trainings, modules that they can take asynchronously, removed from that process. Also, I think just having formal processes in place to monitor local program data, and we have that from the state level in terms of how we look at program data. So the grant program support coordinators that I talked about take the lead on that and are able to drill down and look at the data. Another thing I would think is listen to the local programs. They're the ones that are out collecting the data. They're the first link in the chain to connecting that student to the NRS reporting and to quality data. And listening to them, I think, has been vital to us as we've developed our system and really tried to take our data quality to the next level. I would say that when I came aboard in 2012, we were around, our overall negotiated target was around 37%. And this year, for fiscal year 17, our overall target is 52%, and I look forward to trying to climb up there where Missouri and New York are with their percentages.
Okay, thanks, Bobby. How about you, Rosemary? Do you have any tips for our audience?
I would say most importantly for us has been our management information system, that it become as user-friendly as possible, because if it's challenging for our programs to render their reports, they'll be less likely to even attempt it. So we've been working really hard to try to make things really easy for them, to give them a dashboard, to give them all those kinds of reports that are easily attained out of the data system, so that they don't have to hunt and peck for it. They don't have to work really hard for it. If we can get that data to them more easily, they've shown us that they're much more inclined to use them. So we worked hard on that, and we're still working hard on that.
And a tip that came in through the chat pod to me from Pennsylvania, that in Table 4 they added average hours in their Table 4, and they put it between total attendance hours and the number completed. And they said that they find that very helpful. So that's just one more tip to add to the pot. So I do want to open it up now to any additional questions that you might have for our panelists. And if you are planning to sign out or sign off soon, Myra's going to put into the chat pod the evaluation form for our webinar, and I hope that you will please fill that out for us. That's the best way for us to improve our webinars and make sure that we're meeting your needs. In the evaluation form, you'll find a spot to make recommendations of other topics you're interested in hearing about. And that will go out to all of you via email as well. So does anyone have any additional questions or comments that they would like to share with us? Or panelists, while we're waiting, do you have any concluding words of wisdom that you'd like to share?
Marcella?
Yes, Larry.
Hi, this is Larry. Yeah, I just wanted to thank our presenters, especially Bobby, Rosemary, and Elaine. I found it really fascinating and interesting, and I was really appreciative of your time and effort you've taken, not just for this presentation, but in helping develop such great data systems and approaches. I just want to mention a few things in summary, if you don't mind, what I heard. I wrote down like 6 things that just as summarizing. One thing I noticed was for quality, you need to have really build that into your data system and let the data system do a lot of the work for you, both in intake, looking for errors, and catching errors and preventing errors from entering, and also particularly in the reports, which were really critical and key to have the right kind of reports, and not only have them, but have them in a timely basis, and very critical also, easy to access. So I noticed that was a common among all 3 presenters, and also including teachers and local program staff in this whole process of getting them on board. And that was really critical, even though initially it's often difficult to do that. But it was good to hear that there was a good turnaround there over the time where local staff did see the value of doing this and did help them and help their performance. Another thing I noticed was that you need to have staff that's specifically focused on doing this, which I think Rosemary is the best example of that, since that she's an NRS quality person specifically for that reason. But I know other state staff, other of you also have people like Rosemary who are looking at the data as their job and monitoring that and making sure it comes in well. Heard very strongly about the importance of incentives, financial and otherwise, to getting locals to do this, money being a key thing. If their funds are tied somewhat to the performance, if they're getting extra incentive money or whatever, then they're going to, local staff are more likely going to pay attention to that. Another final thing I saw was the importance of communication and guidance and uniform requirements that everybody knows, that are clearly articulated, and that are offered through trainings or technical assistance or whatever. So that's what I got out of the webinar. I'm sure others got that and other things as well. So again, thank you very much. And Marcella, do you want to close us out?
Sure. Thanks, Larry, for that summary. That was great. And thank you all for participating. As I said earlier, I really hope that you both gained some great tips from our panelists and hopefully saw yourselves in what they said as well, so that you, again, recognize that you are using these promising approaches. I know that sometimes we hear about things that Octave is suggesting, and it seems kind of challenging to see what it could be, what it could look like in practice. But I think as we saw all those similarities in the tables, the reports that the panelists shared with us, and I think that many other states have those in place as well. So again, I want to encourage you to see that what you're doing is a promising practice as well, and we look forward to hearing from other states at our next webinar, and I hope that you will join us for that as well. So thank you to our panelists. Thank you to all of the participants for joining us, and we'll talk to see you all soon.
Thank you.
Bye, thanks.
Bye, everyone. Bye.